am so glad to be here with all of you this morning. I have been in Unitarian Universalist churches my entire life and find that whenever I enter a UU church, there is a piece of my heart that knows that I am home. So though today is my first visit with your congregation, yesterday being my first day ever in Idaho, know that I recognize you. That being here with you in this space on Sunday mornings is so important, and I am so glad to be here. Thank you for welcoming me. As you've heard about, I'm here today to share a little with you about the congregation that I serve in Taunton, Massachusetts. As you heard from Elizabeth, our church has been in decline for many years. Once thriving, our sanctuary can hold over 800 people without a problem. It's daunting. The church shrank to a regular Sunday morning attendance, often in the single digits. During the early 2000s, when there was more than 2 digits, they would actually hold a little celebration. We have one of the largest physical buildings in the Unitarian Universalist Association across the country, over 40,000 square feet, so that the small number of people were really dwarfed in that space. In 2012, the church was at something of a crossroads. The building was cavernous and empty. The congregation was exhausted, and literally every member of the church was on the board of trustees, because otherwise there wasn't enough people to fill the seats. There was some money in the bank, although not a lot, and there was a desire to do things differently. They asked me to come and work with them with a radical idea in mind, to put all their eggs in one basket, throw out almost everything they had done before, and become a different kind of church. They wanted to be a church that mattered. When we are facing the real possibility of death, we are able to live in a way that we might not do otherwise. I was a hospice chaplain for the first 5 years of my ministry and saw this play out over and over again. At the time, I didn't realize that organizations are the same way. That in a church, when you are facing the real possibility of death, you have the courage to do things you might not otherwise do. When I began my ministry there was a lot of things that I wrote into my letter of agreement that they had to agree to, including throwing out the order of worship as they knew it, changing all of the songs, revamping all of our spaces so that there was a children's space in literally every single room, and opening up all the doors. In our building, there were some doors that hadn't been opened in 20 years. It was a different thing to do. I met with our board of trustees the first time that year. I remember the words of one of our longest time members. He had been part of the church since 1972 and was generally a man of few words, a lot of nodding and occasional, "All right, Reverend." But that day, as we started to think and dream about what we could be in this congregation, this man looked right at me and said, "Reverend, this church has been here since 1637. It's been here for hundreds of years, and it could close tomorrow and no one would notice. Make it so someone will notice." In order to explain our church, I have to tell you a little bit about Taunton. Taunton is an older city, and it has a lot of needs. The closest building to ours for the church is City Hall, which is now called the Old City Hall, as it was set on fire by an arsonist 8 years ago and has not yet been repaired. It has a front window that holds a huge sign with red letters that says City of Taunton closed. The next building over is the police station, which was set up with inadequate supplies and has been serving as the temporary location for the police for the past 15 years. 40% of our downtown is vacant storefronts, and over 60% of the children in our public school systems receive free or reduced lunches due to poverty. The city is over 50,000 square people, 50,000 people, and 30% don't speak English as their first language. There are a lot of needs. It's not a city that you would think to plant a Unitarian Universalist church in today. Our stereotypes about ourselves are such that when I told some of my colleagues I was going to start working in Taunton, one responded with, "You know our people aren't in that city, right?" It is not what we think of when we imagine a Unitarian Universalist today in 2018, except that it's one of the oldest churches in the country, one that has our history and practice in its very bones. So to say this is not who we are or who we can be does not make sense to me. In 2012, our church began by changing some fundamentals of how we are together. Always a formal place, as we are housed in a neo-Gothic cathedral. I should add that in addition to our sanctuary being over 5,000 square feet, the ceilings stretch 30 feet into the air. We began by putting a children's corner in every room of the church with coloring books and toys, and adding a foosball table to the social hall where we have coffee hour. I cannot recommend foosball highly enough. We got ours off of Craigslist for $45, just saying. We added childcare as a line-itemed cost to the budget, and we did not plan events unless children could be accommodated. We added some music to worship that got people more engaged with the singing, stopped using the hymnals every week, and let go of the opera singers that we were periodically bringing in as soloists. We made sure that every person who came in the door was warmly welcomed multiple times during their first few minutes with us. We began talking to the community. I went out to the local area and met with every manner of person. That's how I met Jack. I met with people in the diner and at the Chamber of Commerce meetings. I walked to the town green to get to know our neighbors and to find out the needs in the city. I talked to people about what mattered to them, not just as a church, but in the community of Taunton and southeastern Massachusetts. We talked about what was important and what they believed in. I remember talking with one person about her son, her fears for him as he was addicted to opiates, and what might happen if he could not get help, about the day she found him in the snow next to her house, and how hard it was to wake him up. I began to hear stories about downtown, about how it used to be a place where people flocked to be, but we were now lacking a center, a community where people could gather, a sense that we knew what it was to be together. There are probably 100 stories I could tell you about what we've done in the last 6 years. Some of it's worked better than others. Some of it has been utter failure. And some of it has been unfettered joy.
Can you tell them about the puppy?
Sure. I was going to tell them about the Matthew Mission, but I can tell them about the puppy pantry too. I can tell them about both. Well, we run 2 organizations, as Elizabeth mentioned. The one I'll start with telling you about is the Matthew Mission, which is named after the Bible verse, the Matthew 25:40. Throughout my travels and meeting people in the city, I met a man named Mark Cook. Mark had been homeless as a youth, and he had a heart for those in need. And over the past 2 years that he had been working in the city, he had built up an informal network of support. I say working. He wasn't getting paid by anyone. He just felt that it should be done. So he had started collecting food and clothing for those in need and putting them in the trunk of his car, and then meeting people at an abandoned grocery store in the parking lot and handing them out. I met him, I don't know, it was a Tuesday afternoon. And I liked the work he was doing. I was intrigued by it. I wanted us to be part of it, so I asked him, "What do you need, Mark? What can the church do to help you and support you?" And he didn't miss a beat. He said, "I need to work someplace that is not the trunk of my car." He said, "I need an office, maybe someplace with heat. Do you think I could find someplace with heat?" And I said, "Well, let's walk through our very large building." We walked through the very large building. We started to talk about the possibilities. Mark had worked in a church before, or volunteered as a church member before, but was thrown out by that congregation after he came out to them as gay. So we started to talk about what that would be to be in our space. I wrote to my board of trustees. We had grown to about 30 members by that time, so there was members who actually weren't on the board, so that was pretty cool. And I told them about my conversations with Mark, and they did not hesitate a moment. Yes, they said, this is the work we should be doing. Set up an office. So we moved Mark in the next week. And since that time, he has been helping people out of our office at First Parish. It's become a ministry of the congregation. We now hand out food vouchers and clothing vouchers. We're linked with the Salvation Army, so we give out food and clothing on behalf of them. We do heating assistance, all kinds of things that were never available in Taunton before. We open up, as you heard about, in the wintertime. And yes, we have a pet food pantry. This was started from another volunteer who simply saw the work we did with the Matthew Mission, and she said, what about people who have pets, who can't afford to keep their cats and dogs? And I said, well, I don't know, what about them? And she said, what if we started to give people food for their pets so that they wouldn't have to give them up just because they can't afford them? So that's what we started. We started giving away food and litter and all kinds of things, and that grew into a ministry unto itself. And then we were given 12 kittens. And the good people said, surely you will take care of them, First Parish. 12 kittens. So for a while, we had 12 kittens in our basement. And our volunteers took care of them and farmed them out and eventually got them adopted to different places. You never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to happen when you open your eyes up to the ministry that might be possible. I'm allergic to cats. Our church is a different place than it was 6 years ago today. We have about 95 members now, and Sunday mornings are lively and full of laughter. On any given Sunday, about a third to a half of the people in the building are children, and our congregation reflects the city we're in. We have some people who don't speak English as their first language, and the church is about 15% not white. We have some people who come in on Sunday mornings who are now from our widely varied programs that we have, including some folks who are homeless or addicted to different things and struggle with those issues. It is a church today that is every inch alive. I will tell you all that Elizabeth is right. Not every church is as this one is. But one of my greatest joys in seeing the work we have done in Taunton and seeing a church like yours and learning of your hopes and dreams for the future, of your building campaign, of your continued growth and emphasis in the community, is to know what is possible, to know what good we can do. To look death in the face. Just because we have been here does not mean we will stay here. We are here. We live, we grow, we thrive because of the work and the love of the people like you, and what it means to be Unitarian Universalist in this world. So I thank you for being an inspiration of mine, of what might be possible. And as I leave today, I leave you with a challenge. Whatever the challenges are here, I know they're not the same as they are in Massachusetts. You don't even have a Boston winter. Yeah. But you have challenges. You have needs. You have ways in which the work you do changes the community you are in. So live into that and give of it all that you can for the love of this faith. May it be so. And please join us